Good evening. It is my honor and pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker tonight. Dick Durbin is the senior senator from the great state of Illinois. The Democratic whip of the United States Senate, and with J Street's help, the majority whip of the United States Senate. And he is a forceful and eloquent advocate for human rights, human dignity, both in the U.S. and throughout the world. Senator Durbin is also a personal friend for almost 50 years. We both worked for another great Illinois senator, Paul Douglas. Both of us have children named in honor of Senator Douglas, who profoundly influenced our lives. My wife, Joanne, and I cherish the times we are with the Senator, Dick Durbin, and his wife, Loretta. In the 10 years since our founding, we at J Street have known Senator Durbin as a strong friend and ally. He has been a proud and outspoken advocate of a sane, rational, diplomacy-first foreign policy. That stands in absolute contrast to the policies being advanced by the current administration. Senator Durbin supports policies that advance our nation's security by promoting the values of peace, freedom, democracy, and tolerance. He is the top-ranking Democrat on the Senate Appropriations Committee and that subcommittee on defense, which allocates nearly half of our nation's discretionary budget. He was an absolutely essential champion of President Obama's diplomacy with Iran. In late summer 2015, when many predicted that the nuclear agreement with Iran would be gutted by a Senate resolution of disapproval, Senator Durbin, with our help, orchestrated a David versus Goliath battle to preserve the accord. An article in the Washington Post was titled, quote, "How Senator Durbin Spent His Summer Saving the Iran Deal," close quote. He continues to stand in the way of reckless efforts by the Trump administration and congressional hawks to undermine and tear up this successful pact. In 2002, Senator Durbin was one of only 23 senators who voted against the invasion of Iraq. When he talks about the dangers of an unnecessary march to war and touts the importance of diplomacy, he knows what he is talking about. We know we can count on him to be a steadfast and passionate voice against the likes of John Bolton and Mike Pompeo as they try to push our country down that path once again. As a rock-solid supporter of the State of Israel, Senator Durbin understands that the only way to secure its future as a democracy and as a homeland for the Jewish people is through a two-state agreement with the Palestinians. He demonstrated his commitment to that essential goal last year when he added his voice to a letter from 10 senators to Prime Minister Netanyahu, opposing demolitions and settlement expansion in the West Bank. The senators wrote to the Israeli leaders, quote, "We urge you to change course so that you do not foreclose the possibility of establishing two states for two peoples," close quote. Friends, let's now give a J Street welcome to our guest, my senator and friend, Dick Durbin.
How are you? Angus, good to see you. Hello. Good to see you. Thank you very much. Let me thank Bill Singer and also acknowledge George Mitchell is going to be a critical part of your program this evening. I see my colleague Angus King, and the lights are keeping me from reaching out. There's former Senator Mitchell. Good to see you, George. You're going to be a great part of this program this evening. Elise Hogue, Mart Halpern, many friends who are gathered here. 10 years ago, as Jeremy has just recently recounted, he had a vision for what it meant to be a true friend of Israel, a vision that echoed the words of former Secretary of State John Kerry when he spoke about the United Nations resolution condemning Israeli settlements. Here's what John said. Some seem to believe that the U.S. must accept any policy, regardless of our own interest, our own positions, our own words, our own principles, even after urging again and again that the policy must change. Friends need to tell each other the hard truths, and friendships require mutual respect. As we mark the 70th anniversary of Israel's War of Independence, it's necessary that we continue to tell the hard and sometimes uncomfortable truth to our friends. I want to tell Jeremy and all of you who made J Street a reality. You've been such an important part of the dialogue here in Washington. You have changed the conversation. You have moved us forward in a new dialogue as a nation in support of Israel, but a nation that is dedicated to a vision of a two-state solution. 2 years ago, I came to J Street to thank you for supporting President Obama when he called for an historic understanding with Iran. It was an incredible achievement, not just for the President and the United States, but for Israel, for the world, and you were part of it. Here's what this deal did. It put in place the most intrusive monitoring regime on any nation's nuclear program since the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. It reduced Iran's ability to produce a nuclear weapon by reducing its centrifuge and uranium stockpile, and it extended the breakout time to produce a nuclear bomb. I didn't know that I was going to be personally engaged in the whipping of this, although I do that for a living in the Senate. But as it turned out, there was some uncertainty in the beginning as to which Democratic senator would take the lead. And Harry Reid gave me a nod in my direction and said, "Proceed, do your best." And I did. I reached out to my colleagues on the Democratic side to try to measure where they were and what was going through their minds. And there were a couple things we did which were a little different. One of the first things I realized was that August is a deadly month. It's deadly because the members of the Senate and House disperse around the world. Some of the greatest ideas in politics die in August. People sitting on beaches, sipping drinks, forget all about this place, and don't want to be bothered. And so I decided to become the pest that every whip must be, and to figure out where every Democratic senator was at every day of the month of August. And periodically to call and ask them, how are things with the family? Been thinking about the nuclear agreement with Iran? Can you make it back for a briefing? The CIA would like to talk to you. Number of agencies. And so we kept people at least in conversation. As I was doing this, members were speaking among themselves, groups of them, interested in this issue. They came back from the August break, and if you'll remember, the dominant theme at that point was not this Iran nuclear agreement. Those who opposed it didn't say we're against the agreement. They just said, oh, we could do better than this. And so I decided to try something I'd not seen before, and I invited to meet the Senate Democratic Caucus the ambassadors from the P5+1 nations. They sat at a table, the ambassadors of China, Russia, sitting next to one another, ambassadors from Great Britain, France, European Union, Germany, they were all there. And our caucus asked them questions in a very informal way. And the first question, of course, was, will the next agreement be better? Which led to laughter from these ambassadors. They reminded our caucus, do you know how long we've worked on this? Do you know what it took to reach this moment? If you naively believe that tomorrow there'll be a better agreement, you're wrong. And then I can recall the ambassador from one of the countries I won't name said, do I understand that you are going to turn on your own president and vote against him? Really? Members of the Senate Democratic Caucus thought about those answers, and they brought in the experts and asked hard questions as well. And the net result of it was 42 members of the 46 members of the Senate Democratic Caucus supporting the Iran nuclear agreement. It was an historic moment. I don't think I imagined at the outset that it would turn out the way it did, but it did. And you played a big role in that. You may not realize it, but I hope you do, because you were the other voice in the room. You were people speaking up for Israel and for the agreement. You were those who believed, those who are gathered here this evening and others, who believed that what we are seeking to achieve with the Iran nuclear agreement was clearly not only in the best interest of the Middle East and the world, but in the best interest of Israel too, that they would have a safe neighborhood to live in. Well, that was then and this is now. A new president, a new situation. We have a president who surrounds himself with chaos, who on any given day could say or do almost anything. He doesn't appear to be driven by philosophy or any moral compass. Sadly, one of the few constants in his erratic tweets and rants is his insistence that the United States should pull out of this landmark nuclear agreement with Iran. And this reckless move seems more driven by an obsession of undoing anything achieved by President Obama than by any sound policy. Can anyone imagine that it is an effective negotiating strategy with nuclear North Korea to arbitrarily walk away from the Iran nuclear agreement? As we face a May 12th deadline, as we face the May 12th deadline for extending U.S. sanction waivers on Iran, we face a man-made, president-made crisis created entirely by the White House. There is no telling what Tehran would do if the U.S. tears up the deal. But Iranian officials have warned they will resume production of 20% enriched uranium, which could trigger a confrontation in one of the most volatile regions in the world. And we will have lost that unique global coalition that came together to create this agreement. Rather than trying to undermine and kill this deal, we should build on it, use years of compliance to advance follow-on measures, and work with nations around the world to make certain we do everything we can to bring peace to the Middle East. More than anything, J Street has been focused on the peace process in Israel. Nothing is more central to peace than solving the Israeli-Palestinian question. Rhetoric, of course, matters, and this president's rhetoric and policies are making peace harder to achieve. He's made no serious effort to bridge the two sides. Instead, he focuses on petty and sometimes provocative measures that do nothing to advance the larger peace process. Defunding the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian refugees in the Near East, which provides funding for Palestinian refugees, or moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem in the absence of a larger peace agreement are not strategies for peace. We used to know because it was the accepted foreign policy of the United States what a peace agreement would eventually look like. A negotiated two-state solution requiring mutual recognition of Israel as the homeland for the Jewish people and Palestine as the homeland for the Palestinian people. One that definitely assured Israel's security. Yet, for the first time since the Oslo Accords, a recent poll shows Israeli and Palestinian support for a two-state solution to be below 50%. And it gets worse. 77% of Palestinians now oppose the position that the future state of Palestine will be a demilitarized nation protected by a multinational force. 77% of Israelis now oppose East Jerusalem as the Palestinian capital. Among younger Palestinians, polling suggests their preferred option is a one-state solution with equality and no longer just as a fallback position. The good news is that there's still a plurality, some 46% of Israelis and Palestinians, who prefer the two-state solution. Dr. Deborah Shushan put it best when she paraphrased a Winston Churchill tweet, in a tweet I should say. She said, that would have been something. Can you imagine that? I can't. Here's what she said in a tweet. Israelis and Palestinians are two states, as two states may be the worst solution except for all the others. I still believe in order for a fair and lasting peace, the two-state solution is the right place to be. The alternative is the status quo, which is in no one's best interest, and because of changing demographics, threatens to undermine Israel's democracy over the long term. So in order to restart negotiations, with the United States playing the role as mediator and honest peace broker, here's what this administration needs to do. Come out strongly in favor of a two-state solution. Reiterate and clarify what the President said in his Jerusalem announcement. We are not taking a position on any final status issue, including the specific boundaries of the Israeli sovereignty in Jerusalem or the resolution of contested borders. We need political will on both sides, to Israel and Palestine, and the United States is uniquely situated, maybe the only nation in the world situated to make this happen. If this administration truly wants to preserve a path toward a two-state solution, it has to speak out against the consistently expanding settlements in the West Bank that threaten the viability of any future Palestinian state. But it should be even-handed and speak out as well about the Palestinian government's failure to reform, hold elections, and address Hamas' stranglehold on Gaza. And it should work with the extraordinary leaders in Jordan and other countries in the Middle East. Jordan, you know, is an incredible story. When I think of the debate in the United States of America over bringing in 50,000 refugees, 50,000, as we face the worst refugee crisis in the history of the world, I cannot help but think about Jordan today and the refugees that they have accepted, a diverse grouping of refugees from all over the Middle East, an extraordinary show of courage and leadership on their part. Let me close by saying this. It's been 55 years to the day that Martin Luther King wrote his letter from the Birmingham jail, 55 years ago. And he said that famous line in his letter, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." Now, for the time being, the Trump administration has forfeited the United States authority as a neutral broker and given up on a two-state solution, which may be the only way to bring real peace. In the hearts and minds of the Palestinian people, we have abandoned our standing and influence in this peace process. The result? Israel is less secure. It is the ultimate betrayal to Israel and peace. Today, justice everywhere is truly threatened. It is hard and the outlook may be bleak, but we cannot and will not give up on the possibility of peace or those marching to secure peace. In his final speech, Yitzhak Rabin, who died fighting for peace, said, "For Israel, there is no path that is without pain, but the path of peace is preferable to the path of war." Rabin was right then, and he is right again today. Thank you for allowing me to speak. And let me just close by saying, my friends in J Street, if I can just, one word in closing. You're such a critically important voice in this political process. I hope you appreciate that when members of the Senate and House sit down to make some of the toughest decisions, they remember things that you've said. They remember your friendship. They remember your encouragement. What you have achieved in 10 years is truly extraordinary. A commitment to the future of Israel and a commitment to peace in the Middle East. Thank you all so much for allowing me to speak this evening. Thank you.